Hello Year 5 and welcome to your second PDW lesson this week. So, keeping on the lines of being healthy and thinking about our well-being, we're going to be looking at how to understand the concept and the impact of what negative thinking does to us, what negative thinking does to other people around us. Okay, so the aim for today is to have a look at that impact. We need to be able to identify what helpful and unhelpful thoughts are and how we can come up with some different strategies to deal with the unhelpful thoughts. And we're then going to have a look at generating some positive affirmations, which I know we've looked at a little bit when I started with you in Year 5. So we're going to pick that back up again this week. So let's think about our big questions. How do helpful and unhelpful thoughts affect the way we feel and how we act? What should we do when we have unhelpful thoughts? And how can we encourage helpful thoughts? So we're going to explore those three questions today. So, have you ever heard someone turn around to you and say, "Oh, penny for your thoughts"? So this is when you might come across someone who's sat there very deep in thought. Another person is curious as to what it could possibly be that they're thinking so deeply about. Now, those thoughts that we could be having can be positive or negative, but it is also completely normal to remember that you can have a mixture of both. Nobody can be that positive not to have the odd negative thought that pops in and out of their head. Now, sometimes we keep those thoughts to ourselves, okay? Now, I know especially sometimes if I have a negative thought, and I know it's only a negative thought that I'm thinking about, I might not voice that because I know that it might have an impact on somebody else, and it might just be a passing thought that comes by, but we tend to keep those negative ones more to ourselves, okay? However, you might have also heard the phrase, a problem shared is a problem halved. So sometimes if you do have a negative thought, you think, "Do you know what, I might need some help trying to get rid of this or think my way out of this to turn it into something positive." Sometimes you might want to share that thought with somebody else, okay? Now, that's why that expression is a good one, because that's somebody looking at somebody going, well, they're having a deep thought, but is it going to be a good one or a bad one? Well, I'll tell you what, let's offer my support and ask, penny for your thoughts. That's someone offering to help you try and halve that problem for you. But it helps that person not bottle it up, because if we bottle up negative feelings and thoughts for too long, bad things can happen. So I have sent home a penny for you to have a look at, okay? And what I'd like to do is write a negative thought that you might have had recently, or a thought that you might often have about something, about someone, could be anything. Okay, so it might be one where you're thinking of something negative about yourself. It could be where it's linked to some particular worry or fear that you might have. It could just be a negative thought about something that's going to happen. So it might be something you're worried about that's going to happen in the future. And what I want you to do is I want you to share that thought, okay? So write it down, okay, so that you know whether it's a negative thought. And we're going to keep that and we're going to look at that when we come back at the end of the lesson. So pause the video and just jot down one of those thoughts. Okay, so let's explore what the impact of negative thoughts are, okay? Because at the end of the day, they're always thoughts. And sometimes those thoughts in your head can be your worst enemy because they're not real. They're not going to happen unless you put them into action and they materialise. They're just thoughts, anything that's going around in your head. So what I'd like to do is if you're sat with a partner, even if you're sat at home, and just have a sit and think about what some of the consequences might be of having these negative thoughts. So why might negative thoughts be called unhelpful thoughts? Think about the key word of unhelpful there. How might they affect the way we feel? How might they impact the way we act, the way we behave, the way we present ourselves? And what might happen because of a negative thought? And can negative thoughts affect other people around us? Okay, so I'd like to just have a sit and think about those consequences and just have a think about those questions. Pause the video and have a think. Okay, so according to what science says, we actually tend to spend more time thinking about our negative thoughts than we do about positive things. I know for sure that I am sometimes very guilty of doing that. I will focus more on the negative than the positive because sometimes I want to work really, really hard to turn those negatives into positives. But sometimes that's not always a good thing. Sometimes you have to remember the positives. Now, as a result, that means that those negative things tend to stick in your head a lot more and they become a real nuisance because they hang around in your head. And as a result, they can make you feel quite stressed. Now, obviously, when we get stressed, our brains give off all these different chemicals, and they don't make us feel particularly well. And certain feelings and emotions can happen because of those hormones. And as a result, we act in a way that might not be very nice towards other people. So think about the last time that you might have sat and felt maybe a little bit stressed, maybe a little bit negative, maybe a little bit uncomfortable. Okay, so you might have been feeling any of these thoughts and emotions. Okay, I certainly know that at some point in time during a lockdown, I might have come across a few of those because it's a normal human reaction when you experience something that you're not quite used to. So your body has to almost rejig itself to become used to that situation. So think about any of those feelings that you might have had before. So when we have an unhelpful or a negative thought, it's normal. It is a very normal part of life, but to have too many of them can become an issue. So we need to know how to deal with them in a way that's protective of us, but also protective of other people around us. So there's lots of different strategies that people use, because not everyone works with the same strategy. Something might work for some person and one thing might work better for somebody else. So some people might use worry dolls or a worry monster. Now I know in year 2 they look at worry monsters, and they're very good because it's a little monster that sits there and they get to tell all their worries to. And then that little monster makes them feel a little bit better. Okay, you might want to share those thoughts with someone you love. It could be someone that you trust. It might be a friend, it could be a teacher, it might be your mum, might be your nan or your granddad. You might want to write those thoughts down in a journal. Now, I know when I was at university, because it was very, very stressful being at university, sometimes I used to jot those down. Because once they're out of my mind, I then don't have to think about them. And then they don't get stuck in my mind anymore. And once they're written down, they're done and dusted. Because they're only thoughts, they're dealt with and the thoughts are gone. Now, sometimes it's helpful to actually listen to the unhelpful thoughts and talk back to them. So you might be having almost like a bit of a conversation in your head, arguing against yourself, where you're trying to flip that negative into something a little bit more positive. But the one thing that you need to remember is that those thoughts are not facts. They're not real. So you might have a fear of, let's go back to our boy in assembly. Okay, well, I can't stand up in assembly because I'm not very good at talking, which means I'm going to throw up in front of people. It's not true. But if you think about that fact for too long, sometimes you make that fact come real. Okay, and that's why it's important to get rid of those negative thoughts in our heads. So here are some examples of some worry dolls. Okay, now they originated in Guatemala. Now I actually have some of these at home. A friend of mine from university bought these from me. They sit in a little bag. And what you do is all these little dolls, you share all your negative thoughts with them. You put them back under your pillow before you go to sleep. And that way it means that all of those thoughts are out of your head so that you can have a peaceful sleep. But the worry dolls take on all that worry for you so that it's one less thing for you to think about. Now, the worry monsters will work in a very similar way. Okay, so it means that all things could be like a cuddly toy. It could be that they write something down on a piece of paper. But a lot of people will use before they go to bed, because usually when you go to bed, you're not doing anything else. And that's when your thoughts become more uncontrollable. So sharing our thoughts with other people. Okay, so not even just worry dolls. Okay, but you can actually tell it to somebody else, okay? Now, it's always a good way to do this because other people might have some really good advice for you, and they might actually be able to help you see that those negative thoughts in your head is not only a negative thought, but maybe not as bad as you think it's going to be. And sometimes if you bounce that thought off somebody else, actually they can see a bigger picture. That sometimes when you're worried, you see a bit of a smaller picture. Have you ever seen a horse with those little caps on the sides of the eyes? They're called blinkers, but it means that as horses, they can't see either side, so they can only see what's in front of them. And sometimes when we have a negative thought, that's the way our brain works as well. But somebody else you're talking to, they don't have the blinkers on. They can see the much bigger picture. So sometimes it helps to bounce those ideas off somebody else as well. Now, keeping a thought journal. Now, I know when I got older, this is something that was really helpful to me because it means I didn't bug anybody else with my problems. So writing unhelpful thoughts is a bit like sharing it with somebody else though, okay? But because there's no one there listening and giving advice, it does still help get it out of your head, okay? Now, sometimes you can then read it back. And actually, when you read it back and it's written down as a fact in front of you, it doesn't actually seem quite as bad. And as a result, even though you haven't got someone to talk the answer through and give you the advice, sometimes you can do that all on your own. So by writing it down and reading it back, well, that sounds silly. I don't need to be worrying about that. Let's forget about that. And you can do that all on your own. So sometimes that's a helpful way of going about it as well. Now, talking back to your thoughts. So even though you're on your own, you might have your dolls, or you might have your written thoughts negative thoughts written down. That was a muddle. You might want to actually give that negative voice in your head a name. And then you've got to sit there and imagine that you're now talking to that negative person. So now you're going to almost be the person that you need in front of you. So you're going to imagine that you're that person giving advice to that negative thought. So you've now got to imagine that the roles are reversed. Okay, so you then need to give that friend advice and share those thoughts with that person. And you almost need to be the negative and the positive person, because sometimes that's a good way of dealing with it as well. Okay, but remember, you don't have to talk out loud. It's not a case of you sit there and you talk to yourself and have a full-blown conversation. I mean, equally, no one's going to think you're mad or crazy, but it might just be an internal monologue, so a conversation that you have in your head. Okay, now it's important to remember that these thoughts are not facts. Okay, Because negative thoughts can be very, very powerful. And if they sit in your head for too long, they can have very serious consequences. Now, because we tend to believe they're true, we make them bigger than they need to be. So you might have heard of the phrase where you make a mountain out of a molehill. Molehill's very tiny, but as a very, very teeny tiny thought, when you make that into something bigger, you're turning it into a mountain. So you're making it into a bigger problem than it actually needs to be. Because we don't have any proof, those teeny tiny thoughts get bigger and bigger because we just think they're true. So you might be thinking, well, I'm stupid, I bet I'm the only one who doesn't understand this. I can't ask the teacher because everyone will laugh at me. Well, that's not true. Your brain is telling you that you think that's true. So you're going to think that's true. So you're not going to ask for that help because that thought's telling you that you're going to be laughed at. Okay? Now, we all have these different personalities and we all have different opinions, and you will find that there are people out there who are much more positive thinkers than others, okay? So, how can we learn from this for today? Okay, so if we can get into good habits and if we practice them, we'll get better at doing something, okay? So if we get used to using our techniques we've learned about, we can turn those negative thoughts into more positive thoughts. And this is what we promote, a healthy, positive mindset. So a positive mindset is the way that you think, the way that you program your brain to deal with life, okay? So can you think of anything that might help us to have a more positive attitude? Pause the video and have a think. Okay, so let's have a look at some ideas. So one thing we need to do is look after your body. Okay, this could be eating healthily. Okay, this improves your mood. Plenty of exercising. Okay, exercising gives off a chemical in your brain called endorphins. Okay, and that's what gives you that positive, upbeat mood. Getting enough sleep. Okay, I know some of you don't go to bed till really, really, really late, and that might just be because you just can't sleep. A little bit like Miss Humphrey, but it's important to make sure you get lots of sleep. It's also important to make sure you drink enough water. If your body becomes dehydrated, you can become quite moody and in a very negative way. Okay, you also need to make sure you're doing things you love. Now, I know that's a little bit more limiting at the moment, but this is where we need to dig deep and think, well, what can I do at home that I know I love? It might be picking up a good book. It might be having a hot chocolate with some cozy socks on and watching a movie that might make you feel good. It might be that maybe you do some drawing or some colouring, or maybe you're interested in puzzles. So doing the things you love can really help you improve your mental attitude. It could be spending time with family, it could be reading you a good book, it could even be playing with a pet. I know I love playing with my dog, absolutely love playing with my dog, except when she dribbles all over me, then I don't appreciate it. Laughing, okay? Now I bet there's some of you, Hannah, who are always laughing in my lessons. But you can see the difference that having that atmosphere in our classroom makes our learning. When we're always laughing and we're always upbeat in class, we learn so much better. So even just smiling, not only in laughing makes you happy, but it makes other people around you happy. So share a joke, Keaton. I know you're full of jokes. Start sharing them with people. Could be watching a funny video clip, or it could even be telling a funny story. Anything that makes someone laugh. Now, another important thing to look at is starting the day on a positive thoughts. This is when we started this back in September about our positive affirmations. So if we start the day with a positive thought, then the rest of the day surely then has to follow in something positive as well. So this is where we could help others. Okay, so not only does doing things for others, it does help them. Again, it doesn't necessarily then help us, but it gives us a really good feeling. So you could be really kind and caring to someone to help as well. Now we could have a look at a positive affirmation. Okay, so a positive affirmation is a helpful thought that you can say in your head or out loud to get that feeling of being more positive. Now, the more we say these affirmations, the more we start to believe them, therefore the more positive we begin to feel. Now, a lot of people use these positive mindsets, positive affirmations to help develop a more positive mindset. Okay, so let's look at some examples on here. So I'm in charge of my life. The best person I can be is me. Today I choose to be confident. I believe in myself. Okay, so all of those thoughts are there to be able to help you. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it on that slide. Okay, and your activity is going to be an activity you do throughout the week. And what I would like you to do is every day when you wake up, I would like you to write down a positive affirmation that's going to make you feel good. And that's going to be a positive affirmation that's going to carry you through the day. So between now and next Tuesday, and even beyond Tuesday, I just want you to do this forever now, wake up and think to yourself, right, I need to say something positive to myself. And hopefully, if you repeat that positive affirmation, you will start to become more positive, and it will have much more of an effect on other people around you. Okay, so I'm going to check in a week's time. I'm going to ask some of you for some of your positive affirmations on our registration, and we'll see how much happier you are in a few days' time. Okay, good luck, year 5.